Have you ever fantasized about waking up and realizing you have superpowers? Michael Norman, an ordinary young man, awakens the powers of a necromancer in an accident. From logging onto the mysterious forums of the Association of Superpowers to stepping into a land of origins full of unknowns, his adventures have only just begun. The page was simply a white background, the Supers Association's logo, and two blank bars for entering one's email and password. There was nothing particularly eye-catching about the page, so Michael quickly entered his email and password as instructed by the lady at the Supers Association. A sense of anticipation bubbled within him. After all, this was a platform exclusively for supernatural being something he had never dreamed of accessing in either of his lives. Somehow, it feels like I've been invited into a secret organization. After entering his details, Michael clicked Sign In. The page refreshed and soon he was taken to a new interface. In stark contrast to the somewhat bland login screen, this one was more vibrant and lively. It looked like a bustling forum, brimming with activity. Unfortunately, there wasn't any instruction manual. Not that one was needed at first glance. The Supers Association forum didn't seem too different from a regular forum, aside from its content, which was anything but ordinary. Does anyone know the weakness of a swamp wyvern? Seems like we have a big shot in the house. FR. If I recall correctly, wyverns are usually above level 30. Right, that's a teenage wyvern, not exactly strong. It's the nonchalance of subtly calling a wyvern weak for me. Newbie cultivator here. How strong is a wyvern for us cultivators? A level 30 wyvern should be a commander rank beast for you guys. So yeah, you need a knight commander or mob commander to take it on. Dude, just say that one needs to be a rank 3 cultivator. Not my fault, brother. Awakeners and cultivators' power systems can be confusing at times. The forum's content was a mixture of casual banter and discussions. Michael could only read in awe, unable to fully grasp most of it. Once again, the Supers Association delivered essential information right to his fingertips, not in the form of spoon-fed guidance, but through an interactive platform. Since it was a forum, Michael could search for whatever information he needed or ask directly, which he did without hesitation. Though some of the posts on the homepage had intriguing titles, Michael stayed focused. Reading random posts wouldn't help him. He couldn't even understand much of what they discussed yet. Michael dove into a spree of information seeking, and the gaps in his understanding slowly began to fill. By the time he was done, night had already fallen, though he hardly noticed it. Each post he had gone through revealed glimpses of the world's hidden power, leaving Michael both astonished and humbled. The sheer scale of strength among supernatural beings was staggering. Cultivators and awakenerdoms we have all heard of, but aside from a few basics about cultivators, like life seeds and the rank that directly follows, everything else is shrouded in mystery. Information about awakeners is even more elusive. Michael's emotions churned a mix of shock, enlightenment, and excitement. It's my fault for underestimating the people of this world, he realized. In fact, it wasn't just Michael who had these misconceptions. Even the native inhabitants of this world felt similar and often failed to grasp its full potential. After all, it had only been a little over 200 years since Aurora first came into contact with Mana. How advanced could their civilization have become in such a short time? However, they were all very wrong. The truly powerful beings of this world were astonishingly strong, much more than anyone could imagine. For example, Michael discovered the cultivator's power system. There were 7 ranks in total, progressing from rank 1 to 7. Apprentice, Elite, Commander, Master, King, Emperor, and finally Demigod. Yes, Demigod. At first, Michael thought he had misread, but after checking the information thrice, and even watching a video of a demigod effortlessly swatting a 100-meter tall monster like an insect, he was left speechless. He didn't know exactly how strong that monster was, but he was certain that a mere sneeze from it would have been enough to end his life. Even if powerful beings like the demigods were rare, they couldn't be too few. If they were, the Federation and the Supers Association would have likely kept information about them under tight wraps. The Supers Association forum truly opened Michael's eyes to a world of possibilities, and he found himself exhilarated by what he had learned. Power, power, I must have it. Before, Michael's motivation to become an awakener was largely driven by a desire to improve his and his family's life, with the goal of living a fulfilling life as a distant secondary. But now, his heart burned with an intense, unquenchable hunger for power. It took a while for him to settle the surge of excitement that coursed through him. In the meantime, Michael had also learned much about awakeners, particularly about the mysterious Land of Origin. This Land of Origin was a mystical realm that was accessible only to awakeners. It was said to resemble a game world, complete with levels, quests, challenges, and much more. However, mistaking it for a mere game was a grave error, one that could lead to dire consequences that they would regret deeply. What linked the land of origin to an awakener was the mark of origin. Michael glanced down at the back of his right hand, where a flower-like tattoo rested. It hadn't been there before, and Michael had never gotten a tattoo, but this mark had appeared right after his awakening and had remained ever since. Curiously, this mysterious tattoo would only reveal itself when he wanted it to. Name: Michael Norman. Race: human. Class: necromancer apprentice. Level: 1. EXP: 0/100. Strength: 1. 3. Agility: 1. 4. Constitution: 1. 2. Intelligence: 4. 5. Attribute points: 0. Skills: undead summoning, undead revival. Talent: infinite evolution 5. Class skill: contract slot 0 seconds. Gift: Mark of Origin. The Mark of Origin had two primary functions. First, it served as a key, allowing an awakener to connect their consciousness with the land of origin. Second, it served as a miniature spatial storage space. Yes, like a spatial storage train. Michael couldn't help but feel a small sense of accomplishment. He had already checked off one of the quintessential must-haves on any transmigrator's list with this discovery. However, there was one detail that piqued his curiosity. His mark of origin was labeled as a gift, but he couldn't find any information about what this meant. Despite scouring the forum, he found nothing related to it. This absence of information struck him as odd. Surely, all the awakeners in the Supers Association would be interested in this topic. So, the only explanation he could think of was that the information was restricted. It likely meant he wasn't yet authorized to access such knowledge. This seemed plausible, and Michael felt that he was on the right track with his guess, especially given the bold level 1 member displayed next to the profile the association had created for him. The implications only intrigued him, making Michael more curious about what a gift was. If even the basic information about demigods could be accessed, a level 1 member like himself, even if it wasn't particularly in-depth, and the fact that details about gifts were hidden suggested that this subject was considered immensely important, more than even a demigod. Perhaps it held the same weight as matters concerning a god. Though the forum didn't have any direct mentions of gods, Michael couldn't shake the suspicion that they might exist in this world. It was only after exploring the forum did he realize just how deep the mysteries of this world ran. Fortunately, he could still investigate other information about the panel in his head, and with that, he turned his attention to the next most intriguing aspect: his talent. According to what he found on the forum, talents could be said as innate skills that could be used without the need for mana. They were akin to high-level skills, except that they were rare even among awakeners. There were two ways awakeners could obtain a talent. One was through pure luck during the awakening ceremony, and the other was by seizing unique opportunities in the land of origin. It was clear that something extraordinary had landed in Michael's lap. However, he felt that his talent was a bit unusual. Talent: infinite evolution. Evolution points: 116 HRS 09 mins 23 secs. Aside from the fact that something called evolution points would appear and accumulate every 24 hours, his talent seemed to be currently useless for the moment. Despite this, Michael was thrilled to have a talent. Even though he didn't understand its purpose yet, he was confident it would prove invaluable in the future. From its name alone, Infinite Evolution, Michael held high expectations for what it might eventually become. Michael also spent some time reading a few things about classes and races, and he had the urge to say something to his teacher, who had claimed there's no discrimination between classes. Bullshit. While it was true that any outright discrimination against classes didn't seem to exist, the reality was far from the idealized version his teacher had portrayed. There was indeed a clear and undeniable division between classes, even if subtle. A phrase Michael often came across in the forum during his research was, "There are no weak classes, only weak awakeners." But from what he had just read, it was undeniable that some classes offered distinct advantages over others. Contrary to the notion of universal balance, at least the school got one thing right: the broad classification of classes into combat, support, and lifestyle roles. Now, thanks to the Supers Association forum, Michael also discovered that there were actually 5 types of classes general class, rare class, special class, hidden class, and unique class. General classes were the most common classes among awakeners. A large percentage of awakeners fell into this category, which is why they are considered common. These classes are also easily recognizable, as they provide only 2 attribute points per level up. Rare classes were a step above general classes, granting 4 attribute points per level up and often allowing for the use of magic or other special abilities. However, a class does not necessarily need to focus on magic to be categorized as rare, like the Berserker class. For example, special classes were somewhat unique and unconventional, making them difficult to categorize strictly as either general or rare. A chef class, for instance, provided 3 attribute points per level up, while a barb class might only grant 2. Despite both being special classes, the term special referred more to their unconventional nature and niche focus than their power. These classes can be considered rarer than rare classes, but their unique nature makes them versatile in how they are grouped. Hidden classes were rare, essentially inheritance type classes that very few people can have simultaneously. Similar to special classes, they are rare but have an added layer of exclusivity. Hidden classes cannot be naturally awakened, but can only be obtained through special means, or when specific conditions are met, which makes them particularly elusive. Unique classes were the rarest of all, limited to only one person able to possess a particular unique class at any given time. There wasn't much information about unique classes on the forum, but Michael didn't think that was actually the case. He read somewhere that the number of awakeners in Aurora was a little over 70,000, and he found it hard to believe that no one had any information about unique classes. If they truly knew nothing, it wouldn't even be recognized as a legitimate class type. Michael believed it wasn't that the information about unique classes didn't exist on the forum. Rather, it was because of his restricted access. His authority level wasn't high enough to access such information. It seems authority levels aren't just for show. I should try my best to raise mine, Michael thought, a subtle smile forming on his face as he processed his new world of possibilities. Despite feeling like his head might burst from the flood of new information, it was as if an entirely new world had opened up before him, a world he found utterly fascinating and impossible to resist. These worlds are truly interesting, with so much to offer. What surprised Michael even more was the revelation that even one's race could directly influence the benefits received upon leveling up. This discovery unveiled yet another layer of possibilities, sparking his curiosity even further. From what he had read so far, Michael learned that each level up as a member of the human race granted 0 points to all stats, 5 in intelligence, and 2 attribute points. While Michael wasn't sure if this was low or high compared to other races, it seemed significant, since the land of origin is said to be like a game world. I wonder, is it possible to change races? Michael mused, intrigued by the thought. He tried searching for information on the possibility in the forum. However, just like in the cases of gifts and unique classes, his query found nothing. As usual, he surmised that this either meant the information didn't exist or his authority level wasn't high enough. Already used to this, Michael shrugged off the disappointment and decided to move on. His attention soon landed on his class Necromancer, which to his pleasant surprise turned out to be a rare class. Michael also discovered the races weren't the only things that provided benefits, as one leveled up classes did too. Aside from the attribute points awarded based on their grade, certain stats would gain additional boosts depending on the class's speciality. For the Necromancer class, for instance, leveling up grants 1 points to strength and constitution each, 3 in agility, and 5 in intelligence, along with 4 attribute points. And Necromancers are basically paper defenses. A punch from a similar level warrior class could probably take out more than half my health. Michael thought immediately. This realization helped him understand why so many people in the forum kept emphasizing that power ultimately depended on the awakeners themselves. Classes, race, cultivation, resources that enhanced stats themselves, and attribute points if one utilized these things wisely. Even a seemingly weak awakener with a tailor class could become formidable. The more Michael read, the more excited he became about the future. He couldn't wait to enter the land of origin, though he knew he couldn't rush in without making some proper preparations. Yes, preparations. As an awakener, he was naturally bound to enter the land of origin. But according to the forum, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows there, especially for new awakeners. A start post on the forum titled Tips for Newbies, endorsed by the Supers Association itself, shed some light on the challenges. Michael learned that when an awakener entered the land of origin for the first time, their initial location was random. He could be near an active volcano, a frowning wasteland, or even within a monster's nest. However, there was a balance. According to the post, it would be something a new awakener should be able to handle theoretically, and Michael didn't like the sound of Thathan's need to make proper preparations. Even the experienced commenters in the post echoed this sentiment, repeatedly emphasizing the importance of preparing oneself properly before taking the plunge. Thanks to the post, Michael also realized why the Supers Association provided such generous funds. It was indeed meant for acquiring resources. In the Supers Association platform, alongside the main forum, there was also a store section. Michael was left in awe by the sheer variety of goods one could buy from there. Refined iron dagger, price $230. Refined iron spear, price $285. Health potion, price $500. Leather pants, leather shoes, leather upper body armor. Michael browsed the list of items recommended for newbies, carefully picking those that caught his eye. The store offered two delivery methods, picking up the items at the Supers Association or opting for home delivery. Michael chose the latter without hesitation. Why step out of home if he could avoid it? Besides, compared to the total cost of the items he had bought, the delivery fee seemed cheaper. With the delivery fee included, Michael spent a total of $328. Just like that, a third of the $15,000 provided by the Supers Association was gone. The Supers Association is really scummy. Michael grimaced in pain as he connected his account to the Supers Association platform and watched his money disappear. But despite the hefty expense, Michael had no regrets. Even though death in the land of origin wasn't real death, if he could prevent it, why shouldn't he? The penalty for dying was severe enough to avoid it at all costs. Each death came with a harsh penalty, a permanent 10% reduction in all stats. Along with that, the dead awakener would also be temporarily banned from re-entering the land of origin. Perhaps this penalty wouldn't seem as harsh for new awakeners, but it was a big deal for the real powerhouses. Imagine having 100 points in all stats and watching 10 permanently disappear. It was a nightmare for the top-tier awakeners. After all, the stronger one was, the harder it was for them to increase their stat. It wasn't just numbers. At that point, a 1-point stat increase for a level 100 awakener could very well be the equivalent of a 10-point gain for someone like Michael. After placing his order, Michael received confirmation from the Supers Association platform that his items would be delivered before noon the next day. That suited him just fine. It's not too late to enter the land of origin tomorrow anyway. It's even better. I'm too exhausted to do anything now. Michael was also very hungry. He had learned many new things, which had significantly filled the gaps in his understanding. Anything that remained could now be gradually learned with time. For now, all Michael wanted to rest and wait for the new day to arrive before entering the land of origin. He was excited, but he had his priorities straight. Setting his phone aside, Michael was about to pick up the plate he'd used earlier when a knock came at his door. "Come in," he said instinctively. When he saw who had stepped inside, he was surprised. Aunt, yes, standing at the door was indeed Aunt Mia. Michael had been so engrossed in the Supers Association forum that he hadn't noticed anyone entering the house. "Well, it seems like our new awakener has been busy," Aunt Mia teased, making her way to his bed and settling comfortably. "Aunt Mia," Michael said, a little embarrassed by the title, but a happy smile spread across his face. He could see a smile on Aunt Mia's face, too, one that was threatening to widen and hidden within. He could also see that she was proud of him. For both Michaels, one from Earth and one from Aurora, Aunt Mia was the closest thing they had as a true parent, the only person from whom they had experienced true parental love. Orphaned at a young age, both versions of him had found solace in her unwavering care, and Aunt Mia was like a mother figure to them, especially to Michael, originally from this world. Despite her petite stature, Aunt Mia's blue eyes held the kind of love only a mother could give to her child. Michael greeted her respectfully, and he was happy that she was happy before he could speak. Aunt Mia beat him to it. "Lily told me about your little adventure today." Michael silently clicked his tongue in annoyance. Maybe he shouldn't have shared so much, Lily knew. The news he wanted to deliver himself had come through someone else. Still, it wasn't a big deal. They were a family. After all, the amount of money that association gave you is really a lot, but you need to be careful with it, Michael," Aunt Mia said anxiously, her voice tinged with concern in her eyes. Michael was still a young boy. She had no interest in his money. Instead, she was worried about his spending habits, though Michael's past behavior of handling money somewhat reassured her. The sheer amount he now possessed made her feel worried that he might waste it. "And don't pay any mind to your silly cousin. There's no need." "Aunt Mia," Michael interrupted, his tone serious, cutting her off before she could continue. He already knew where this was headed, but he didn't want to hear it. His family was his driving force, his purpose. Now that he could finally provide for them, how could she even think of refusing? The thought left him uneasy. "Aunt Mia, the money the association gave, well, a big chunk of it is for my well-being, so you don't have to worry about anything." As he spoke, Michael pulled out his phone, his fingers poised to transfer a portion of the funds to her without hesitation. "Michael," Aunt Mia's voice was sharp with concern. Her eyes reflected a mix of doubt and worry, and she feared that he was about to inconvenience himself for their sake. In fact, she was right, but did Michael care? No, he didn't. This was likely a stupid decision, but for once, at least one, Michael wanted to satisfy his selfish desire. If he ended up broke, he could wait for the next payout, while working hard in other areas in the meantime. Michael wasn't afraid of hard work. Ironically, it was excessive hard work that had killed the original Michael in this world. The hopeful fool had clung to a desperate rumor he heard online that if he trained hard enough to push himself to the brink of night, the chance of his awakening would be higher. The original Michael knew this was nonsense, but feeling unlucky and with many responsibilities on his shoulders and dwindling hope, he pushed himself too hard. In the end, he died, allowing Michael from Earth to take his place. "It's okay, Aunt Mia," Michael said smoothly. "You don't know this, but the Supers Association is still going to give me more resources aside from this soon." He lied with a straight face. It was, of course, impossible. The association wasn't going to do more charity for him. They weren't his family, and even some families couldn't always provide that much. "Are you lying to me?" Aunt Mia asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You know I never lied to you, Aunt Mia," he said, delivering another lie with an innocent face. This time, he felt a pang of guilt in his chest, but didn't let it show. Aunt Mia looked conflicted, her expression reflecting her mixed feelings. Michael noticed her hesitation and knew he had to strike while the iron was hot. "Also, since becoming an awakener, I have noticed that my appetite is slowly increasing. We'll need more food at home, Aunt Mia." Michael spoke, feigning seriousness, and as if on cue, his stomach rumbled loudly, adding authenticity to his words. The timing worked. It convinced Aunt Mia a little, and her skepticism began to fade. What made her trust his words even more was his status as an awakener. As an awakener, he should be valued by the Federation. Right, she thought. Like most adults, she knew of the Federation's admiration for awakeners, though she didn't know that while they valued awakeners, they weren't exactly planning to pamper them. Finally, Aunt Mia chose to believe Michael. "Okay," she said softly. Relieved, Michael wasted no time and immediately transferred some money to her. "Feel free to use it as you see fit, Aunt Mia, and please get a few treats that Lily enjoys too," he added with the air of a magnanimous benefactor. Just then, Aunt Mia's phone buzzed, showing a bank notification. A $5,000 credit. Aunt Mia's eyes widened in disbelief, and she opened her mouth to protest and was about to scold Michael when he cut her off once again. "Trust me, Aunt Mia, this money is nothing to me now. Didn't Lily mention that I'll be getting money every month?" Aunt Mia hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. If what he was telling was the truth, maybe just maybe her little Michael could indeed afford to spend money like this. However, she decided that, while she'd use some of the money for the family's well-being, she'd save the rest until she could confirm his words. Seeing that he'd successfully convinced his aunt, Michael secretly sighed in relief, and a smile appeared on his face. "You're hungry, right? I brought some cake and snacks on my way back." "Want some?" Aunt Mia asked, remembering the thunder that had erupted from his stomach earlier. "Yes, I'd love some, Aunt Mia." Aunt Mia smiled, took the plate that Michael had planned to carry out earlier and left the room, returning shortly with some snacks. They shared a few more words before she left the room, leaving Michael alone. Soon, the soft sound of his snores filled the room. A small, contented smile played on his lips as sleep overtook him. Today had been the best day of his life, even if it was just as stressful. The next morning, Michael woke up feeling refreshed, although his mind felt clearer after awakening. The mental exhaustion wasn't that easy to be shaken off. Fortunately, a good night's sleep had worked wonders. Not quite ready to get up from his bed, Michael sat there on the edge as his thoughts drifted back to the events of the previous day. It's amazing how quickly life can change, Michael mused, a smile tugging his lips. Yesterday had been a turning point, and he couldn't have asked for a better outcome, and the best part was yet to come. Today's the day I enter the land of origin. I wonder what I'll encounter. Excitement bubbled up as he imagined the possibilities that waited for him in the new day ahead. After shaking off the last traces of drowsiness, Michael stood and pulled open the window shades, letting the morning light flood in, brightening and invigorating the room. It's quite bright. What time is it now? He grabbed his phone from the desk and glanced at the screen. It was just past 8 a.m. He really had gotten a good night's sleep. Aunt Mia has probably gone to work by now, and Lily should also be at school. With that thought, Michael left his room to confirm if anyone else was still in the house, as expected. It was just him. Although the delivery from the Supers Association wasn't due until noon, there was a chance that it might arrive early. So Michael decided to freshen up and wait, and he didn't want to leave the apartment without being prepared. Besides, once he received his order, he planned to enter the land of origin immediately. He really couldn't wait any longer. Since he had some time, Michael decided to clean up the house to pass the time. His classmates would probably never believe that even an awakener still has to clean, Michael thought, amused. Awakeners were celebrities of sorts, even though little was known about them, except through a few clips of them in action. Just like celebrities back on Earth, there were some overzealous fans who probably couldn't imagine their favorite person doing something as mundane as using the toilet. While a few mischievous thoughts crossed his mind, a chuckle escaped Michael's lips as he happily cleaned up whatever he could around the house. After finishing his chores, Michael brushed his teeth, showered, and got dressed. Since the delivery still hadn't arrived, he reheated some leftover rice from the previous day and ate it while browsing the Supers Association forum on his phone. Never in either of Michael's lives had he been so invested in studying. It was understandable, for while the information was somewhat complicated, it was fascinating. It felt like it had been pulled straight from a fantasy novel. It was worlds apart and far more immersive than the academic subjects he had to endure. Time passed quickly, and a little over 11 a.m. his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Curious but a bit wary, Michael answered. "Is this Mr. Norman?" A voice came through. Hearing the question, Michael immediately guessed who was on the other end. "Yes, I am," Michael replied, already standing up. "Great, Mr. Norman. I'm here with your delivery. I'm currently in front of your apartment building, but I am not sure which floor you live on. Don't worry, I'll meet you downstairs. Please wait for me," Michael said, already stepping out of his apartment and locking the door behind him. Perhaps because the apartment building was old, or because the landlord was too cheap, there was no elevator. Residents had to use the stairs to reach their floors. While it was inconvenient, it was probably for the best, because if there was an elevator, the rent would have likely been higher, resulting in it not being as affordable to the many residents living in the building right now. Luckily, Michael's apartment was on the second floor, so it didn't take him long to meet the delivery man from the Supers Association. As Michael approached, he couldn't help but be momentarily taken aback by the man's appearance. The delivery man, who seemed to be in his late 30s, had an imposing physique, but what truly caught Michael's attention was the man's right hand, or rather, the mechanical limb that had replaced his right hand. In this world, advanced technology has made the loss of a limb a manageable inconvenience. Enough that losing a limb isn't considered a serious issue anymore. One could easily get a mechanical replacement that functioned almost like the real thing, except for lacking a sense of touch and, of course, being expensive. However, most people with such mechanical limbs also purchased artificial skin to cover them, which was both realistic and far cheaper than the limb itself. There were generally only two types of people who went without artificial skin covering on their mechanical limbs: those who couldn't afford it, and those with a particular sense of style. Judging by the delivery man's choice of clothing that deliberately exposed his mechanical arm, he likely fell into the latter category. However, Michael couldn't deny that the man had pulled it off well. The exposed mechanical limb looked quite cool, giving him a rugged, almost heroic look. "Are you Mr. Norman?" the delivery man politely asked as he saw Michael approaching. "Yes, I am. I assume you have my order," Michael replied, also nodding in response to the delivery man's partner's greeting, who remained seated in the van. After confirming Michael's identity, the delivery man quickly began unloading Michael's order There were quite a few packages, and Michael knew that even with the improved stats granted by his awakening, lugging everything upstairs to his apartment would be a challenge. To his relief, the delivery man with the mechanical arm offered to help, which Michael greatly appreciated. Once everyone was inside his apartment, Michael stood in the living room, staring at the pile of packages on the floor with a mix of excitement and dread. For $1,000, every time he muttered how much he had spent to buy them. It felt like a knife was stabbing into his heart, yet his hands moved eagerly, tearing open the boxes. Michael's hands splurged recklessly while placing his orders from the Supers Association store. Just because he had some money in his account, he had carefully followed the recommended list of essentials for a first-time entrance to the land of origin, selecting only those that suited his needs. Half an hour later, Michael had opened every delivery package and placed their contents neatly in the special inventory of his mark of origin. As a new awakener, the special storage in Michael's mark wasn't particularly large, but it was more than enough for his current requirements. He didn't bother changing into the leather armor he had bought or equipping the weapons he had purchased. According to the forum, anything worn or held by the awakener wouldn't follow them into the land of origin. Only items that were stored within the mark of origin would make the journey. So everything Michael thought he needed was already stored there. Taking several deep breaths, Michael made his way into his room, feeling anticipation, excitement, and a bit of nervousness. According to the forum, connecting one's consciousness with the land of origin meant leaving it behind in the real world. So his body had to be placed in a suitable position before leaving. And so Michael decided that lying down his bed was the safest option. Let's do this. He concentrated on the mark on his hand, trying to connect his consciousness with the land of origin. Since it was his first time, it wasn't easy, but thankfully, the land of origin was an innate part of every awakener. It didn't take long for him to finally succeed. Michael's right hand, which was raised in the real world, slowly fell as his body began to softly snore. New chosen detected. Chosen identity confirmed. You have gained a new skill. Detect. Michael had spent hours reading about the land of origin, endlessly speculating where he might find himself upon arrival. Would it be in the middle of a dense forest, a sprawling plain, or perhaps dangerously close to a monster nest? The possibilities were as vast as his imagination, and Michael had hoped that as long as it wasn't anywhere near monsters, he'd be fine. When he opened his eyes, however, he wasn't greeted by serene landscapes or open skies. Instead, he found himself in a dark, confined room. The black brick walls were sleek with moss, if not for the holes in the roof that allowed a few rays of sunlight to stream in. The room would have been pitch black. A foul stench filled the air, assaulting his senses and making him gag in disgust. What is this smell? Rotting garbage, or worse. Shaking his head, he pushed his discomfort aside. I know. Focus. That's not important right now. Where on earth am I? If he hadn't registered with the Supers Association and gained access to information about the land of origin, Michael might have panicked. However, though Michael knew each awakener's initial spawn locations were random, he wasn't exactly thrilled about his current surroundings. The problem wasn't the location itself, but rather the disgusting smell. His current location wasn't the worst per se. At least there were no monsters or erupting volcanoes maybe. But he knew it was better to proceed with caution until he learned more about his surroundings. This wasn't just his own hunch. Experienced awakeners had emphasized caution multiple times in their tips for new awakeners forum post. First step, observe your surroundings. Michael turned his attention to inspect the wall beside him. A wall made of old, weathered bricks. Figures, Michael thought sarcastically as he read the description. Having expected it, he wasn't surprised by its sudden appearance. The information was courtesy of a new skill he had gained actually, one that every awakener was granted upon entering the land of origin for the first time. Detect. Much like the skills in games, Detect allowed the user to gather information about specific objects they focused on. It was an essential skill, especially for both new and experienced awakeners alike. However, Detect came with its limitations. For instance, it couldn't reveal information about living beings that were significantly stronger than the user. If the target was more than 20 levels above the user, Detect simply wouldn't work. On the other hand, the skill revealed detailed information when the user was significantly stronger than the target. Detect could also improve over time, providing more details as the user's knowledge grew. Shifting his focus away from the room's wall, Michael took a moment to observe his own body in this world. As expected, nothing from Aurora had followed him, not even his clothes. Thankfully, he wasn't naked. He was dressed in simple attire that commoners wore in the medieval times on Earth. Aside from the clothing, there was nothing else of note on him. Now that he had a basic understanding of his surroundings, Michael decided it was time to explore. However, before leaving the room, he decided to arm himself just in case. There was no sign of monsters outside, but it was better to be safe than sorry. He had read countless stories on the forum about the unfortunate fates of new awakeners and had no intention of becoming another cautionary tale on his first day. The first item Michael retrieved from his storage space was the leather armor he had purchased from the association. While better options existed, they were either too expensive or impractical for someone at this level. Suppressing the urge to gag from the foul smell around him, Michael quickly but quietly donned his leather armor. Teamer to arm myself. Michael had purchased 3 weapons from the association, 2 melee weapons and 1 firearm. The gun had surprised him. It was easy to obtain without any complications apparently. His status as an awakener was all the license he needed. Given the gun's effectiveness in the land of origin, he decided to bring one along as his primary weapon. Compared to the spear and dagger he'd purchased, he felt that a firearm would be much more reliable. Though he'd never held a gun in either of his lives, let alone fired one, it offered a few clear advantages over melee weapons. For one, it allowed him to attack from a distance, and even if he missed, he could fire multiple shots quickly. Of course, guns also had their drawbacks. For instance, the noise could attract monsters or other unwelcome attention. Michael had considered this risk, and even read about it on the forum. And that was why he had also bought a silencer for his gun. Guns are one of the best tools to have in the early stages, but they quickly become obsolete as one grows stronger. Like the experienced awakeners in the forum said, personal strength is still the most important thing here. After loading his gun and disengaging the safety, Michael took a deep breath, relaxing his tense shoulders. Then he stepped out of the dark room. Even if his first impression of the land of origin wasn't what he had envisioned it to be, Michael's excitement about this new world remained undiminished. New chosen detected. Chosen identity confirmed. You have gained a new skill. Detect. Michael had spent hours reading about the land of origin, endlessly speculating where he might find himself upon arrival. Would it be in the middle of a dense forest, a sprawling plain, or perhaps dangerously close to a monster nest? The possibilities were as vast as his imagination, and Michael had hoped that as long as it wasn't anywhere near monsters, he'd be fine. When he opened his eyes, however, he wasn't greeted by serene landscapes or open skies. Instead, he found himself in a dark, confined room. The black brick walls were slick with moss. If not for the holes in the roof that allowed a few rays of sunlight to stream in, the room would have been pitch black. A foul stench filled the air, assaulting his senses and making him gag in disgust. What is this smell? Rotting garbage? Or worse, shaking his head, he pushed his discomfort aside. No, focus, that's not important right now. Where on earth am I? If he had registered with the Supers Association and gained access to information about the land of origin, Michael might have panicked. However, though Michael knew each awakener's initial spawn locations were random, he wasn't exactly thrilled about his current surroundings. The problem wasn't the location itself, but rather the disgusting smell. His current location wasn't the worst per se. At least there were no monsters or erupting volcanoes nearby. But he knew it was better to proceed with caution until he learned more about his surroundings. This wasn't just his own hunch. Experienced awakeners had emphasized caution multiple times in that tips for new awakeners forum post. First step, observe your surroundings. Michael turned his attention to inspect the wall beside him. A wall made of old, weathered bricks, figures. Michael thought sarcastically as he read the description. Having expected it, he wasn't surprised by its sudden appearance. That information was courtesy of a new skill he had gained, actually, one that every awakener was granted upon entering the land of origin for the first time. Detect. Much like the skills in games, Detect allowed the user to gather information about specific objects they focused on. It was an essential skill, especially for both new and experienced awakeners alike. However, Detect came with its limitations. For instance, it couldn't reveal information about living beings that were significantly stronger than the user if the target was more than 20 levels above the user. Detect simply wouldn't work. On the other hand, the skill revealed detailed information when the user was significantly stronger than the target. 1. Detect could also improve over time, providing more details as the user's knowledge grew, shifting his focus away from the room's wall. Michael took a moment to observe his own body in this world. As expected, nothing from Aurora had followed him, not even his clothes. Thankfully, he wasn't naked. He was dressed in simple attire that commoners wore in the medieval times on Earth. Aside from the clothing, there was nothing else of note on him. Now that he had a basic understanding of his surroundings, Michael decided it was time to explore. However, before leaving the room, he decided to arm himself just in case. There was no sign of monsters outside, but it was better to be safe than sorry. He had read countless stories on the forum about the unfortunate fates of new awakeners and had no intention of becoming another cautionary tale on his first day. The first item Michael retrieved from his storage space was the leather armor he had purchased from the association. While better options existed, they were either too expensive or impractical for someone at this level. Suppressing the urge to gag from the foul smell around him, Michael quickly but quietly donned his leather armor. Teamer to arm myself. Michael had purchased 3 weapons from the association, 2 melee weapons and 1 firearm. The gun had surprised him. It was easy to obtain without any complications apparently. His status as an awakener was all the license he needed. Given the gun's effectiveness in the land of origin, he decided to bring one along as his primary weapon. Compared to the spear and dagger he'd purchased, he felt that a firearm would be much more reliable, though he'd never held a gun in either of his lives, let alone fired one. It offered a few clear advantages over melee weapons. For one, it allowed him to attack from a distance, and even if he missed, he could fire multiple shots quickly. Of course, guns also had their drawbacks. For instance, the noise could attract monsters or other unwelcome attention. Michael had considered this risk, and even read about it on the forum. And that was why he had also bought a silencer for his gun. Guns are one of the best tools to have in the early stages, but they quickly become obsolete as one grows stronger. Like the experienced awakeners in the forum said, personal strength is still the most important thing here. After loading his gun and disengaging the safety, Michael took a deep breath, relaxing his tense shoulders. Then he stepped out of the dark room. Even if his first impression of the land of origin wasn't what he had envisioned it to be, Michael's excitement about this new world remained undiminished. New chosen detected. Chosen identity confirmed. You have gained a new skill. Detect. Michael had spent hours reading about the land of origin, endlessly speculating where he might find himself upon arrival. Would it be in the middle of a dense forest, a sprawling plain, or perhaps dangerously close to a monster nest? The possibilities were as vast as his imagination, and Michael had hoped that as long as it wasn't anywhere near monsters, he'd be fine when he opened his eyes. However, he wasn't greeted by serene landscapes or open skies. Instead, he found himself in a dark, confined room. The black brick walls were slick with moss. If not for the holes in the roof that allowed a few rays of sunlight to stream in, the room would have been pitch black. A foul stench filled the air, assaulting his senses and making him gag in disgust. What is this smell? Rotting garbage? Or worse, shaking his head, he pushed his discomfort aside. No, focus. That's not important right now. Where on earth am I? If he hadn't registered with the Supers Association and gained access to information about the land of origin, Michael might have panicked. However, though Michael knew each awakener's initial spawn locations were random, he wasn't exactly thrilled about his current surroundings. The problem wasn't the location itself, but rather the disgusting smell. His current location wasn't the worst per se. At least there were no monsters erupting volcanoes nearby, but he knew it was better to proceed with caution until he learned more about his surroundings. This wasn't just his own hunch. Experienced awakeners had emphasized caution multiple times in that tips for new awakeners forum post. First step, observe your surroundings. Michael turned his attention to inspect the wall beside him. A wall made of old, weathered bricks. Figures, Michael thought sarcastically as he read the description. Having expected it, he wasn't surprised by its sudden appearance. The information was courtesy of a new skill he had gained, actually, one that every awakener was granted upon entering the land of origin for the first time. Detect. Much like the skills in games, Detect allowed the user to gather information about specific objects they focused on. It was an essential skill, especially for both new and experienced awakeners alike. However, detect came with its limitations. For instance, it couldn't reveal information about living beings that were significantly stronger than the user. If the target was more than 20 levels above the user, detect simply wouldn't work. On the other hand, the skill revealed detailed information when the user was significantly stronger than the target. Detect could also improve over time, providing more details as the user's knowledge grew, shifting his focus away from the room's wall. Michael took a moment to observe his own body in this world. As expected, nothing from Aurora had followed him, not even his clothes. Thankfully, he wasn't naked. He was dressed in simple attire that commoners wore in the medieval times on Earth. Aside from the clothing, there was nothing else of note on him. Now that he had a basic understanding of his surroundings, Michael decided it was time to explore. However, before leaving the room, he decided to arm himself just in case. There was no sign of monsters outside, but it was better to be safe than sorry. He had read countless stories on the forum about the unfortunate fates of new awakeners and had no intention of becoming another cautionary tale on his first day. The first item Michael retrieved from his storage space was the leather armor he had purchased from the association. While better options existed, they were either too expensive or impractical for someone at this level. Suppressing the urge to gag from the foul smell around him, Michael quickly but quietly donned his leather armor. Teamer to arm myself. Michael had purchased 3 weapons from the association, 2 melee weapons and 1 firearm. The gun had surprised him. It was easy to obtain without any complications apparently. His status as an awakener was all the license he needed. Given the gun's effectiveness in the land of origin, he decided to bring one along as his primary weapon. Compared to the spear and dagger he'd purchased, he felt that a firearm would be much more reliable. Though he'd never held a gun in either of his lives, let alone fired one, it offered a few clear advantages over melee weapons. For one, it allowed him to attack from a distance, and even if he missed, he could fire multiple shots quickly. Of course, guns also had their drawbacks. For instance, the noise could attract monsters or other unwelcome attention. Michael had considered this risk and even read about it on the forum, and that was why he had also bought a silencer for his gun. Guns are one of the best tools to have in the early stages, but they quickly become obsolete as one grows stronger. Like the experienced awakeners in the forum said, personal strength is still the most important thing here. After loading his gun and disengaging the safety, Michael took a deep breath, relaxing his tense shoulders. Then he stepped out of the dark room. Even if his first impression of the land of origin wasn't what he had envisioned it to be, Michael's excitement about this new world remained undiminished. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level: 2-1. EXP: 8250th. Strength: 160. Agility: 1905. Constitution: 140. Intelligence: 510. Attribute points: 6. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Northeast W. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot, 0 quarters. Gift: Mark of Origin. My stats have increased, was the first thing Michael noticed. He hadn't felt anything earlier which made sense, given the pain had been all-consuming. Now, after seeing the digital representation of his stat boost, Michael paid attention to his body and finally noticed it. He stood up and tested a few movements to gauge the extent his stats had risen. So this is what it means to level up, he thought, a sense of awe washing over him since his awakening. This was only the second time he had felt his body was truly different. He could only imagine how much more pronounced these changes would become as he leveled up. Now he was only level 2, but what about when he reached levels like 50? By then, even his less relevant stats for his class, like strength and constitution, might reach superhuman levels. Among his stats, Michael noticed that intelligence had increased the most. Unfortunately, it was currently useless, as he still had no way to utilize mana. The intelligence stat didn't actually make one smarter. It simply represented an awakener's total mana and their ability to learn skills quickly, like spells, thanks to his human race and necromancer class each providing 0.5 stat points in intelligence. Michael now had nearly 6 times the average intelligence of a typical human. The stat system for awakeners factored in their race to determine their strengths accordingly. Even before his awakening, Michael had known that races like elves existed in the land of origin, and some of these elves weren't native to the land of origin. but hailed from other realms like Aurora, where awakeners also resided. For example, an elf with a strength stat of 1 would have it scaled to match their natural physique. So, if elves were inherently stronger than humans, a single point increase in their strength stat might equate to what would be 2 points for humans. This same system principle was applied to class systems, where certain classes had inherent advantages over others. However, all these differences were meaningless to him now, given that he was still lost in the middle of nowhere. The next most significant boost went to his agility stat, which surprised him with a Marga-type class. Like Necromancer prioritize agility, it was a well-known fact that classes would naturally distribute the attribute points upon leveling up, which in turn would make the class stronger. Agility affects one's movement speed, reaction time, dodging ability, and attack speed. Michael wondered what a Marga class like Necromancer would benefit from agility, but he made a note to research it later. After intelligence and agility, strength and constitution saw the smallest enhancements. Strength influenced physical power, melee damage, carrying capacity, and general physical feats. Constitution impacted health, endurance, resistance to both physical and elemental damage, and environmental factors. Michael knew these stats would have been even lower without the boosts from leveling up as a human. If his stats depended solely on his Necromancer class, his mana pool might have been vast, but then even a lower level physical class could probably have taken him down with a single punch. Yet, despite these seemingly small increases, Michael estimated that his overall performance had improved by at least 30%. And this is only from one level up. I need more experience. The surge in power was addicting. Despite the ordeal with the slime, Michael had no intention of shying away. Ever since watching that video of a demigod cultivator in action, he'd vowed to reach a similar level of strength. A single bad run-in with a slime wasn't going to change that. However, that experience had taught him to be more cautious. If he were to face slimes again, he'd either have to use his brains to outsmart them or suppress them with sheer power. Michael didn't consider himself dumb, but he wouldn't exactly call himself brilliant either. After all, an intelligent person wouldn't have just attacked a level for a monster, regardless of its species. With the desperation of an experienced Sundry Dogan, he'd been just that. But if he wanted to use power to suppress any slimes he encountered, Michael's gaze drifted to his attribute points displayed unused on the panel. Maybe, just maybe, they could help him. Attribute points 6. Michael wouldn't claim to know much about his new reality, just because he had spent a few hours browsing the Supers Association forum. But thanks to those hours of studying, he could say he now understood much more about Awakeners than he did before. Aside from a few other things, there was one thing that all Awakeners wanted, regardless of race: attribute points. Each point represented the entire power of an average individual from their respective race, a literal, instantaneous boost. And right now, Michael had 6 of these precious points he could use to instantly strengthen himself. Which stat would maximize these points and help me most right now? Michael wondered. At this moment, he needed an immediate edge, something to boost his survivability and strength. And aside from external items, these 6 attribute points were his only hope. Michael examined his stats carefully, considering which of the 4 would best support him in his current situation. Strength 1, 6, agility 1, 9, 1, constitution 1, 4, intelligence 5, attribute points 6. Michael's initial location could be described as odd. At first glance, it didn't seem particularly dangerous, but it couldn't be called safe either. It might be a stretch to label it dangerous because of a single slime, but that slim yet genuine monster also made this place questionable. What if there were more monsters? And what if they weren't slimes? Michael didn't particularly like slimes, but he admitted that they were probably the best kind of monster he could currently handle on his own. If the acid slime had a stat system of its own, Michael imagined that it would likely have 90% of its stats to intelligence, 8% to agility, and the remaining 2% split between strength and constitution, just enough to stay alive. This was just a rough estimation, but it was obvious that, despite being an acid slime, its constitution was minimal. Even with gun and bullet technology refined over 200 years, he shouldn't have been able to kill the slime by destroying its core embedded within its acidic body. And now that Michael had time to think, did he realize just how incredibly lucky he'd been? If he had encountered any other monsters say. A wolf with 90% of its stats in agility, he'd probably be back home right now, cooking something for his cousin. Monsters were supernatural beings, which meant even a wolf's speed would be terrifying. Normal wolves were already faster than an average human, so a monster wolf would have been a nightmare to escape. A slime, in contrast, was manageable. With a long-range weapon, it could be defeated without risking close contact, but without one, getting close enough to fight and kill an acid slime was almost suicidal. Just one wrong step could result in excruciating pain, a worse deterrent than even facing the consequences of death. You really hope there's no other kind of monster in this building than slimes, Michael thought. As for hoping for no monsters at Alpha, it wasn't his wish. He was greedy for the experience points. Okay, it's decided. I'll choose agility and constitution for a necromancer. These stat choices might seem wasteful, but Michael had no choice. Right now, he was a fake necromancer, without a single undead summon or spell to cast. Although intelligence was his most important stat, it felt useless at the moment. Ironically, investing in it felt more like a waste at the moment. As for why he chose agility in constitution, the reasoning behind his choice was simple. The latter would boost his health and endurance, helping him survive longer, and the former would help him in running from anything he couldn't defeat or at least stay out of their reach. Between the two, he planned to put more points into agility. I'm really a disgrace to necromancers, he muttered to himself. After a moment of thought, Michael stopped hesitating and began allocating his points to increase his stats. First, he placed 2 points into the Constitution. Constitution 3, 4. After increasing his Constitution by 2 points, Michael immediately felt different. A warm sensation spread through his body, leaving behind a subtle sense of increased health. The changes were hard to pinpoint, but the most noticeable effect was on his mutilated left arm. With his Constitution now 3 times that of an average human, the scar seemed to fade, slight line it completely disappearing, but looking older, as though it had been healing for years. This kind of showed an important detail. Future scars wouldn't vanish entirely. Either an increasing constitution would only make them appear more healed. Even though I haven't ascended to rank 1 yet, with 3 times the constitution of an average human, my lifespan should already be pretty long. Right, Michael wondered. Though he was uncertain, he felt that he was on the right track. Awakeners had incredibly long lifespans. Rank 1 awakeners could live up to 200 years, so what about those at higher ranks? Beyond offering great power, the land of origin presented another alluring gift. Immortality. Michael suspected that for many, immortality was the real prize. Power was just a desirable bonus. After taking a moment to adjust his enhanced constitution, Michael allocated points to his agility stat. Agility 4, 9. Compared to constitution, the effects of increasing agility were immediate and dramatic. When Michael tried to move his hands, the newfound flexibility and speed caught him off guard, making him stumble, and he almost flipped himself over. Amazing. Though in an awkward position, his heart was filled with excitement. The boost to his agility felt like breaking free from the invisible chains that had been weighing him down. For times the average human speed, I'm practically a mini superhuman in the eyes of ordinary people now. And this is just level 2. Once I advance to first rank, the stat increase will be even more insane. Michael was thrilled with his growth, and he was eager to get even stronger. Now, he didn't fear acid. Sun-setting him feared the possibility of not finding any to fight before exploring the abandoned building, though he took a few minutes to adapt to his newfound agility. After testing his speed and movements, he was left stunned. The average speed of a human is about 100 meters in 10 seconds. I just tried running, and I'm hitting around 80 meters per second, and I think it's only this fast because I still need to get better control over my body. This is just the strength of an unranked awakener at level 2. No wonder only a handful of cultivators dared challenge the arrogant awakeners on the forums. But more than anything else, Michael was overjoyed. He felt lucky to have awakened like cultivators before truly stepping into the supernatural path. Awakeners below rank 1 were also referred to as apprentices, a fact that was even reflected on their status panels. But considering his current strength, even a new rank 1 knight might not necessarily be as strong as he was now. Right, are cultivators really that weak? No, I can't think like that. Michael quickly scolded himself, sensing a flicker of arrogance. That wasn't a good path, lest he become conceited. The waters of this world run deep, and I'm not qualified to look down on anything yet. After calming himself, Michael also recognized But his distribution of attribute points as a necromancer was clearly far from ideal. It was better to excel in one thing than to be mediocre in everything. But the issue was that he didn't have much of a choice in this. Right now, strength mattered the most for leveling up and more importantly, for his survival. As for necromancy, since he'd need to kill a monster first to create an undead summon, he could only hope that, if he did encounter one, it wouldn't be too strong. There's nothing I can do about it now, and no point in worrying. I'll leave it to fate. First, let's see if the slime dropped anything valuable. Excited, Michael made his way over to the acid slime's corpse. As for his last attribute point, he decided to keep it in reserve for emergencies.